Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to my channel. Well, after playing through what is probably the worst Pokemon game I've ever played, and Hey You Pikachu does not count as a Pokemon game because it does not have the word Pokemon in the title, so again, I'm not counting that. Hell, I think I would rather play Hey You Pikachu than Pokemon Stankey Poo here ever again. But not long after I rage quit that game, my girlfriend bought Pokemon Legends Arceus and then encouraged me to play it. So, is Pokemon Legends Arceus a good game? Or would I rather be a mob stuck in an Otome game? Which would be another isekai, by the way, and I'll get into that later into this review. Well, let's find out. But before I get to the good parts of this game, I must stop and beat a dead Mudsdale. Let's talk about the graphics first. The most generous thing I can say about the graphics is that they are a mixed bag. The Pokemon don't look bad. Heck, some of the new designs and boss fights are actually pretty cool. Weird Deer, who is a new ride Pokemon, obviously is a Princess Mononoke homage. The human characters are about what I expect from a Pokemon game. A light anime design and a lot of cel shading. While they're not extraordinary, they are certainly passable. No, what comes off as epic fail is the look of the environment and areas. Yet looking at this, you're saying it's a cheap Breath of the Wild knockoff. And here's the important thing to remember when you say that about Breath of the Wild. It was 5 years old when this game was released, and it was developed for the Wii U, not the Switch. You should be doing better, not worse by now. Designed for the grass, when you look at it, looks like it comes out of the PS2 era. The graphics on some of the wall look janky, like they're not loading right. And yeah, the color design of the second area looks like shit. And I mean that both figuratively and literally, it looks like shit. Yellow and brown for the Swamp Waterland area. Yeah, I call it Shining Pearl Stanky Poo because that was what the experience I had with the gameplay. But it never had me in areas that looked like I was literally walking in stanky poo. Swamps can be hard to make colorful, that's certainly true. But you know what? Some blues and some grays can help bring more color and life to them. Because this here looks like I'm walking in feces. It's such a shame there's a lot of efforts making you feel like you're exploring and having free run of a Pokemon world, only to have such simple things pull you out of the experience. And oh yeah, the water. I would love to say that it comes out of an early PlayStation 3 game, but early PS3 games don't need to be insulted that much. The water here is just ugh. To put it simply, this could have been a contender for Breath of the Wild's throne, or at least a beginner Breath of the Wild, if it had another 6 months of development to improve these graphics. What a shame. Oh well, let's talk about what's good about the game. So, as I said, the story here is an isekai. So what is an isekai? Well, it's basically what happens when a person from our world ends up being pulled into another world or time. Think of Wizard of Oz, for example. It's a genre that's being milked to death in the anime industry right now, and a lot of them are isekai only for two reasons. Number one, the writer wants to do a fantasy anime, oftentimes being a bad Dragon Quest knockoff. Number two, he doesn't want to explain the world building in some natural way, so he has to have the protagonist clueless, so why not have them come from our world just like the reader, so he can be as clueless as the rest of us when things are explained. Kaori exists in Slayers for a reason. He's there so Lena can explain to him and to the audience stuff that everyone else in the world should know. But when the isekai story is done extremely lazy, they come off as extremely boring. Throw in a lot of them kind of casually use death and reincarnation, and it takes the fact that, they died in their previous world to get to this world. That would mean they got separated from people they cared about. But woo, this world here looks like my favorite video game. But when the isekais are done right, like Log Horizon, Rising of the Shield Hero, and even that time I got reincarnated as a slime, they can be pretty entertaining, even though the last one does do everything that pisses me off. It's upfront about it, and it's actually funny as hell. It knows what it's doing, and it isn't ashamed to say it. That said, two anime who do death and reincarnation right are Jobless Reincarnation and Ascendance of a Bookworm. They actually acknowledge the death of the characters in the previous life, and the next fantasy world they kind of get reincarnated into isn't always a picnic for them. Anyways, let's talk about the actual game plot. The protagonist starts by finding out they're being summoned by the Pokemon Arceus, who's basically a Pokemon god. No, I'm not kidding. He's God, and he's teleporting you to another world because they need someone to bring humans and Pokemon together. You wake up in the beach meeting the local Pokemon professor who gives you your starting Pokemon after saying you fell out of the space-time distortion that's in the sky. No, Professor, you're wrong. If I fell out of the distortion, I would have fallen on Mount Cornet there. I was more like catapulted out to get here. Oh well, like any modern isekai protag, you get summoned to another world, but you still have your smartphone that works and has unlimited batteries. Or in this case, the Arc phone for all your digital needs. So great, this means I'm in another world with my Poképhone, I guess. Anyways, when you get back to the village, you find that Team Galactic has set up base. Now relax, they're the good guys here, I suppose, helping people move into the areas and find a way to tame the Pokemon and get along with the natives. Oh yeah, I should mention that this Hisui area is based off the real-life island of Hokkaido, and let's just say the real history of the time period this game's fantasy world is based on is kind of complicated and very bloody. And no, I'm not going to be saying more about this can of worms beyond that because I'm not opening them. I am going to say it's worth looking it up on YouTube to find actual historical videos and people who know about the history of Japan talk about this issue. But let's just say it has more in common with an isekai like Overlord than this cute little story involving Pokemon. Anyways, the natives this time being the Diamond and Pearl tribes. After proving yourself to Team Galactic, they accept you as one of their members. However, that subspace distortion is getting larger, and it's causing certain Pokemon that are larger than normal that the locals called Pokemon Nobles and treat as guardians to go berserk, hurting humans and damaging nature. Good news is you fell out of the sky because your unnatural ability to capture and tame Pokemon. You get stuck with finding a way to basically pacify these nobles. And that's basically it. Each new area has you exploring it while meeting and greeting the new Pokemon wardens, one from each tribe, and discovering what their beefs are with each other and what's going on with this area. And basically trying to get to where the noble Pokemon is and find a way to pacify it. And basically what you do to pacify it is you run around and you throw powder on it. But I'll get to that more on the gameplay section. The story is passable. The characters lack any type of really great depth, but they're not annoying. And it's definitely different than you're a 10-year-old kid who gets a Pokemon from his professor and then sets out to complete a Pokédex and beat 8 gym leaders. My main complaint about the game's story is it just ends, and I mean that. You battle this one guy who made a deal with Giratina, who is basically a Pokemon ruler of a parallel world who wants to break out of said world and have a fight with Arceus. Yeah, he's basically Pokemon Satan. But after that, this person just fumes and storms off having been beaten, and you're left with no epilogue. Whether your character can or will go home, just send off to catch them all and fill up the Pokedex, which I hear gives you a chance to capture some copy of Arceus himself. It kind of just leaves you hanging about what actually happens to this character since he got stuck in this world. But like most isekai anime, it's never really told what happens if he finds happiness in the new world or if he ever gets to go home, because most isekai are canceled before they ever finish their story. So, what about that gameplay? To be honest, I haven't enjoyed a Pokemon game like this since the original Red and Blue. Game Freak did a pretty good job of updating the game. Like every Pokemon game before it, you get to choose one of 3 starters from different generations, be it water, grass, and fire, and then you get a quick tutorial on how to catch and train the little buggers, and then you're sent out on your way on a Pokemon adventure. Now, at first glance, this may look like a Breath of the Wild ripoff, but it's really not. You see, Breath of the Wild had one huge world to explore, and the only thing prohibiting you from going everywhere is basically your level. Here, the world's blocked off into 5 sections that are accessed from a map back at your base camp, and you have to unlock new areas by completing main story missions. It's a bit of disappointment that the world isn't more connected, but the game does a good job making sure it's balanced, and for the most part, you're not encountering Pokemon and enemies you can't handle. And even though there are 5 smaller areas instead of one big one, there are still plenty of secrets and Pokemon to discover while exploring. Speaking of discovering Pokemon, capturing and using them hasn't been this much fun since the original generation. Pokemon you come across will come in basically 3 types that you have to worry about. You get the docile type like Bidoof, who you can just walk up and throw a Pokeball and capture. It doesn't run away. And then there are ones like Starly that run away the moment that they encounter you and will only put up a fight if their escape route is blocked. Then you get the majority of them that will attack you the moment they see you, and the only way to stop them from attacking is to throw out a Pokemon and wage war, and you can capture these Pokemon once you get their health down. But the great thing about it is all 3 types of Pokemon can be captured without fighting if you get them by a sneak attack. And the great thing is you get to craft your own Pokeballs, and they all function differently. I do love the jet and wing balls because you can throw them further. Just be careful, there is a bug I discovered that they turn into a rock after a while. Instead of opening and capturing the Pokemon, it just hits them on the head, causing them to get aggressive with you really fast. As far as the battle system goes, it's Pokemon Gen 1 with the updated roster that started in Pokemon X and Y, and I love it. I get the updated types, so I do have to worry that I just can't force my way through with a good Alakazam, but I don't have to worry too much about special ability or the Pokemon's nature too much, and while there is an IV system, it's been gratefully simplified and easier to use. And you can easily update the Pokemon's IV with the use of dust and stones you get from releasing Pokemon that you don't want anymore. I love it. It's simple. It's easy. There's no surprise, and there's no, hey, I just fought a real hard battle and got a real rare Pokemon that is super powerful, only to find out later its IVs suck. Game Freak, if you want casual people to get into the Pokemon games, make games with this kind of battle system instead of trying to cram in an awful motion control mini game constantly into a game that should have just been a normal Pokemon game. I'm looking at you, Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu and Eevee. Keeping things simple like classic Pokemon and have them graduate into more competitive titles would probably be the best thing for trying to get in new players. As far as the challenge in leveling up the Pokemon, it's really easy and actually fun to do. The everyone gets EXP system actually works out well here, considering how the Pokédex has been rearranged and the goals of the game are different. There are really two goal numbers. One, complete the story quest so you can get to the boss of each area and to move on to the next, and I'll get on to that later in this review. And the second one is to fill out the Pokédex, which is more than just catching the Pokemon. In order to complete the dex, you gotta capture a bunch of the same type of Pokemon. I'm talking like 20 to 25 of the critters some of the time. You got to see them use their signature moves and even complete a random side quest. And yes, if you try to 100% the game, expect some tediousness. I'm not going to be using Magikarp Splash 100 times, but when it comes to the open world aspect, this type of change actually makes sense and had me redo my team a bit just to fill out new entries, and that's a good thing. Anyways, completing these objectives in the Pokédex raises your Galaxy rank, which is kind of like getting a badge. Each rank gives you a new Pokeball you can craft, plus raise the level of the Pokemon that will obey you when caught. While there is a trading system, you do need these badges to catch wild Pokemon that are above your level. I cheated and got Togekiss really early when I was at the beginning of the game, thanks to a little bug my girlfriend found that let me get to an area that I wasn't supposed to get to without a special ride that I had not yet gotten. But because I did not have the star rank, my souped up Togekiss was more of a threat to my well-being than to the enemy until I got to the right rank in order to use it. As far as the overall challenge and the balance of the game, it's pretty good. I should mention that your trainer here is an active part of the gameplay now, meaning Pokemon will attack your trainer, take too much damage, and your trainer will faint and get hauled back to the camp with a lot of items from your knapsack now missing. Regardless of how rare or valuable they are, they're gone, unless you're lucky enough for them to appear in someone else's game and they're nice enough to pick it up for you. Basically, dying really sucks in this game. Big time sucks. To add another layer, there are also alpha Pokemon you can bump into, which are much higher than the level of the Pokemon you're using usually when you run into them. You can still capture them if you're good at sneaking around, but direct confrontations with these Pokemon will usually have you losing quite a few Pokemon, if not all of them. You usually have to be careful when messing with the alphas. The good news here is they're usually easy to spot and to avoid. They're a lot bigger and they oftentimes have glowing red eyes. Still, if you can capture them, they make a powerful member to your team. The second goal in the game, though, is to complete story missions until the wardens of either the Pearl or Diamond clan trust you enough to meet the Pokemon nobles, and then you have to fight them by throwing bombs, memorizing things, and dodging their attacks. Yeah, bosses aren't Pokemon battles. They're more like punch-out matches with Pokemon in it, and by punch-out, I don't mean boxing. I mean figuring out their patterns, their tells, dodging, and then counterattacking as fast as you can so you can knock them out and win. I found most of the bosses to be fun and addictive, kind of like a lot of punch-out fights. But a few of the tougher ones were making me wonder why I couldn't upgrade my trainer with armor and new upgrades as well. Is there anything bad about the gameplay? Well, a few things, but they're small complaints. First complaint, there's often a lot of items to get and you have to store them in your satchel, which regardless of how many times you upgrade, it seems to get full rather fast, but it's just the fortunes of war in this game. My only real complaint comes with one of the ride Pokemon. Yet each stage you get a new Pokemon to help you get to the boss of the area, and you can keep that for other areas. You can surf on a fish or ride on a deer. But the last Pokemon, this bird, yeah, he sucks to use. Why? Because you can't land with him. Instead, you have to dispel him, fall a little bit, call him back, dispel and call him back, and hope that you don't fall too far, because falling too far will cause your trainer to faint, and you're back at the camp again with a lot of items missing if you're not careful. Why they don't have a descend and land button with this bird, I don't know, but it makes him a pain in the ass to use. Other than that, the game is perfect. Hunting wild Pokemon is fun. The game's graphics could be better, but the areas are well designed enough to be fun to explore and have a lot of secrets in them. The battle system is fun, and yes, it's balanced. I never felt that things were so easy that I wouldn't be challenged when entering a new area. I did have time to prepare myself for fights, and I did lose sometimes, but that's okay. A game where you can't lose isn't a good experience. But it's certainly better than having a game where I sleepwalked through the entire game with no challenge, only to get my head stomped into the game when I got to the final boss, because there's programming mistakes when it comes to the stats. But having an even challenge where I have to learn and I will be penalized for my mistakes is a good thing, and Pokemon Legends Arceus does it right. The music is a bit atmospheric, but what's here is still pretty good and memorable. We also get pretty faithful Pokemon cries. I did notice that Pikachu doesn't go Pika Pika in this game, but it has its classic Game Boy cry. No voice acting, which is kind of a shame. I would not have minded some voices for these cutscenes. But when I consider what a huge step up this is for the Pokemon franchise when it comes to the rest of the gameplay, I can almost kind of forgive the fact that they didn't put voice acting as part of this package. This game is almost perfect. Almost. If the developers had a few more months to make sure that the graphics in some places didn't look like complete ass, it would have been perfect. The game does get steadily more challenging. The setup makes you catch and experience with different Pokemon more, and losing, although a penalty can be a bit steep, I prefer it over the few hundred Pokemon yen I probably wasn't going to spend anyways. It's definitely worth full price in my opinion. Just if you make a sequel, Game Freak, I want you to do some fixes in that graphical presentation, because this is At any rate, tell me what you guys thought of this game down in the comments section below.